Remember this hall. I remember speaking in Harrisburg Trinity at least once, probably quite a few years ago. So before I share my humble few thoughts I'm going to share this morning, as they say, what do they say? They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. We're going to get about 50,000 words worth here in a 10-minute video. The first 4 minutes are a little sort of promotional video that was made for my school where I teach in Ukraine. It was a longer video, and I selected little snippets of it and asked the professional, could you just make me a custom-made short 4-minute version with these clips? And he did a wonderful job and put some music behind it. And then everything after that, that's actually a little bit old, that part, but the 6 minutes after it is all fresh stuff that I took over the past year. So it speaks for itself. I'll keep this with me, and I might add a few words here and there. So we can go with the video. So our school works in those two buildings. The building closest to us is actually the property of the church that we share property with. And the second building belongs to the school itself. The same team built both. We call them our twin towers. So we've probably been there for about 8 or 9 years. We moved there from an earlier building we rented. This is the director, Vladimir Degtyaryov, and the academic dean is Vladimir Gorbenko. He's my oldest, dearest friend in Ukraine. I met him when he was just a 21-year-old kid, didn't even speak Russian yet, hadn't really made a profession of faith yet. And fast forward 25 years, he's the academic dean of our school. He's the senior pastor of my church and has got a wife and 2 children. His children call me Uncle Ken, but I'm really like a grandfather to them. It's just quite amazing, the developments God brings in your life that you could never foresee. And of course, that's all Russian you see there on those books. We speak Russian in the school. There is a Ukrainian language, and it's becoming more and more dominant now in light of recent political events. But fundamentally, the area of Ukraine where I live has traditionally been Russian-speaking. I have no idea who that is. And we have courses in church ministries, Christian education, missiology, theology. We have had a music program for many years, but unfortunately at the moment we don't. We have a program in youth ministry, and by youth ministry I mean outreach to unchurched youth, not just ministry to church youth, but outreach in the world. A lot of these young men you're seeing, including the one you just saw, were from Kazakhstan. We've had a lot of students from Kazakhstan. And when I say students from Kazakhstan, I mean Russians from the Russian minority in Kazakhstan. We've had students from Moldova, from Lithuania, from Russia itself. But the majority of our students are from inside Ukraine. Funny thing, a lot of our men students who came from Kazakhstan, all of them except one, graduated with more than just a degree. They also got their MRS, as in a Ukrainian wife. So I'm not quite sure what exactly they came to us for, but... Okay, now we're going to go into some of the more recent clips.
чтение у Иоанна Крестителя. Кстати, Иоанн Креститель на греческом и на английском языке это Иоанн Баптист. Может быть, кто-то думал, откуда баптисты взялись. Это те, которые крестят тоже. Но мы не крестим зимой в проруби еще. Может быть, потому что было желающее. Но если серьезно, то...
You notice the young man up in front, he has cerebral palsy, and the lady sitting behind him is Vera. She's a sister in our church who has headed up a tremendous ministry to families with children who have cerebral palsy. The young fellow at the piano, I've known him since he was 2 years old. He just got married. He's older than he looks. It's probably going on 30. His father, Sasha, and I, and Vova. Vova's the nickname for my friend Vladimir. And another brother, Pasha, going back 24 years ago. We traveled all over the region, singing, preaching in village churches, merry little foursome. And this one was just a toddler. And the young fellow in the bow tie too, I remember as a very small child. They're talking about drugs and narcotics.
Well, here I am back in Ashtarak, Armenia, on a crisp, brisk February morning, but not frigid. And I'm teaching here at the seminary, the Armenian seminary. I'm doing a 2-week course on the epistle to the Galatians. I've been coming here regularly, once or twice a year for, oh my goodness, about 18 or 19 years now. And so it's a very happy, familiar place for me to be.
So Armenia is a different country. It's 3 hours flight from where I live, and I've been going there to teach 2-week teaching stints once or twice a year for, as I said, for about 19 years. God brought me to Armenia through an incredible set of really divine appointments and seeming coincidences, and it's just become a very precious dimension of my life all these years. Armenia was also one of the countries of the Soviet Union, as Ukraine, and the Armenians were known as the. Oh, you see that older fellow there? He lost his son just this past year in the the ongoing war with Azerbaijan. Very, very heartbreaking loss. And that war broke out in the final days of the Soviet Union, so it's been going on for well over 30 years now. But the Armenians are a very excitable, volatile, emotional people. They used to call them the Italians of the Soviet Union. So here we are back in Ukraine, and the church tries to pay due attention to every age group, including the older folks, which now includes me. And we have these ministries for the older folks in our region, 55 and up, which are very well attended. You see some deaf people there. We've got considerable work going on with deaf people. This is a Wednesday night prayer meeting. They're singing Благословен. Благословен тот дом. Благословен тот дом. Blessed is that house whose God is the Lord. Благословен. And in Ukraine, and other countries with an Orthodox tradition, you always stand to pray. The boy in the middle is my friend Vova's son, Andrei, and the girl who'll come up in the back in the gray and pink sweater is his sister Katya. Andrei's sister Katya. The sandwiches they're eating, they're the kind of like where you put that George Foreman type grill thing you press down and make it. This is something brand new there, and they were loving it. And one more trip, quick trip back to the seminary, chapel services. And the young man who's going to come up in the next clip, preaching in chapel, his name is Rostislav. The short version is Rostik. And Rostik calls me Papa. There he is. And I met him when he was 15 years old. He was passing by our old college building one day with a couple of buddies of his while I was sitting out front at a sign-in desk for a Bible camp, and I waved him over. Took a couple of attempts, but he finally signed up and came to camp. Came from an extremely broken home situation. Multiple fathers, he never knew his own father. And jumped forward 15, 16 years. Now he's a believer and a father, husband and father of 2 daughters, and a student at our school. And he calls me Papa, and I call him Sonny in Russian, Synok. So it's just amazing. So these are just some examples of the tremendous redemptive and healing and saving power of Jesus Christ in the lives of people. Every story is an individual and an eternal one. And I'm privileged to be part of so many lives over there. I've lived in Zaporozhye, Ukraine now, longer than I ever lived anywhere else in my life. I moved around a great deal growing up. My last name is Sears, but my father spent his entire career with JCPenney. And the only kids, it's true, every word of it, and the only kids I ever knew in school who moved more than I did were military kids. Because pennies tended to move us every 2 or 3 years from town to town to town. Generally speaking, I grew up all over New Jersey and Long Island and a bit of Ohio. So this is a new experience for me at my ripe old age of 62, having lived in a place so long where I remember people like the young piano players since they were this big. And it's something I'm still getting used to, honestly, to tell you the truth, because I grew up the way I grew up. Anywhere I lived for longer than 2 or 3 years, my internal clock was always saying it's time to move. It's about time to be moving on. So I read some passages from the scriptures here where Paul, twice in this passage, he says, therefore. And why, and he says therefore a lot here. In the beginning of chapter 4, too, he says therefore. And when he's saying therefore, he's really summing up. And you can go home and study 2 Corinthians if you'd be interested in the first 5 or 6 chapters. He's really summing up everything he's been saying since the beginning of the letter. And I might be oversimplifying, but from what I get, just skimming 2 Corinthians through the first